Yo, goons, what's good? It is I, Lolo, and I'm back. Today, I wanted to talk about something pretty interesting. In the FGC, in the background, you're going to see me versus Remy Celeste, who is one of the best Axles, not just in NA, but in the world. Also, I've gone toe-to-toe in NA with some of the best Axles, Stealthy, Trevor Sue, and of course, Remy. So I think I'm a little qualified to talk about what I am going to talk about today, which is that I think that a matchup can be hard, quote unquote, but not necessarily bad. There's a difference between those two, right? And I think this specific matchup is a really, really good example of that. So, first off, one reason why it might appear bad at first is because you're looking at a classic zoner versus big body, and historically in fighting games, there tends to be a struggle. Also, if you look at the rating update data, in general, actually, it is a losing matchup for Goldlewis if you just look at the aggregate data of all Goldlewis versus Axel games played, right? Also, there's this agility difference between Axel and Goldlewis, but he kind of has that with every character because he's slow by design. And of course, Axel has some really good keep out normals. I mean, don't get it twisted. Even if this matchup becomes good, spoiler alert, for Goldlewis, if you're doing certain techniques, it's still very difficult to deal with, right? Dealing with 5P, 2H, his anti-airs, Renson, that's all really hard. I mean, don't get me wrong at all. But what can kind of change this matchup? I mean, initially it will feel really, really hard if you're a Goldlewis player and you jump in against Axel with no knowledge. No doubt, if both characters are going at it blind, it's going to be a lot harder for the Goldlewis player. Again, no doubt in my mind, and I say that as someone who personally has gone from getting dumpstered in this matchup to being able to compete with the best Axels in the world. Right? One of the things that makes it better is if you can develop a really disciplined dash block, and that is much easier said than done. Like, to get the right rhythm on normals and to account for how much the Axel player can stagger their normals and keep out tools, it takes a long time, and no one in the world has a perfect dash block, especially on Goldlewis, but you can really see that this makes the biggest difference in the matchup once you actually start practicing it and trying to, implement patience into your neutral. And if you watch some Darkrai versus Axel, for example, on the Nine Moons monthly, I think last month, there was Darkrai versus Remy Celeste a couple of times. You can watch that, and you really see that the Goldlewis can just bide their time and dash block, and all it takes is really one hit, and Axel's risk reward is so low on defense that they kind of just have to hold what Goldlewis does, which is a reason why it can become good. Because once Goldlewis actually gets to play this game against Axel, Axel is particularly bad at defending against Goldlewis because of the risk reward. Right? Another thing that is pretty difficult to do that helps this matchup a lot for Goldlewis is actually using the FD button in your dash. And this is something that isn't really widely understood. I myself didn't understand this until pretty recently. This also applies to the Nago matchup. But Goldlewis has a hurtbox shift in his dash, but it takes a little bit of time for him to shift his hurtbox down to the crouching stance if you do a dash block. Like if you just tap the dash button into down back, even though they reduced his upward hurtbox this patch in his dash animation, it's still not enough to get under Axel 5P, but his crouching animation is often enough to get under Axel 5P. So it's really difficult to do dash block in between Axel 5Ps, but what you can do is dash block and FD a little bit early, and you will go under the 5P, and if you're quick with that, you can whiff punish, and that's really difficult to do, but it is nonetheless really important in this matchup. Right. Also, of course, something that's difficult that goes a long way, this applies to every matchup, but especially in Axel's case, is instant blocking. Axel can't really delay his 2K to 2D, and that is a really important part of Axel player's pressure. If you can get the timing down to IB 2K 2D, you're going to be in much better shape to punish his pressure. Same with Snail, same with Rainwater. If you're able to punish all of those, then you just have a great time, right? And of course, being able to react to command grab and knowing when to escape his stagger pressure, all of those are just knowledge cases, but what I'm trying to get at here is that it's not just a matter of knowledge versus Axel. It is execution, right? Having a good dash block and timing your FD dash blocks and instant blocking, those are not entirely knowledge. There are knowledge components to them, like knowing when to do it, but it's more a matter of execution in that point. But the overall point here is I'm trying to say that despite a matchup looking really hard and no doubt requiring hard techniques to get better at, the matchup can change dramatically depending on what skills are being implemented. And I guess the question would then be, is this just another way of saying that matchups depend on skill level? Well, first off, they do definitely depend on skill level, which is one reason why the matchup discussion is kind of a waste of time. But also, I don't fully agree with that, because we can't look at the matchup chart in the way that robots perfectly optimized to play Strive would, right? Like, we go based off of the current meta game, and even then, it's a little unfair to compare every level of play to tournament level of play. And even for me, like within tournament level play, I'm a high level tournament player, but I am not a top player. And the matchup differs at a top level very clearly, because Darkrai just goes off in that matchup. Like, he does much better than I do. I don't think there's an Axel in the world that could beat him consistently in sets. And I am not so sure that that's a skill issue, because, you know, at least the evidence we have, Darkrai was top 24 Evo, and there were multiple Axels that made it really far. And of course, Axel is a really good tournament character, historically. Right. So that pretty much covers all I wanted to talk about for this video. If you enjoyed, please check out my Twitch in the description. And in the future, I think that I am going to try to upload at least one video a week. Right. Thanks so much, Goons. That's all from me.